Name. All right. Off you go. Name.
I am Spartacus.
Spartacus, yeah. Heard before. Off you go. Name.
My name is Maximus Decimus Meridian, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I shall have my vengeance. I'm sorry. When I said name, I think you mistook that for life story. I genuinely don't care. I'm going to just put John Doe here because you're officially property of the Roman Empire. I can literally call you anything I want, and I don't care about your background. So off you go. Okay, well, kind of steals my thunder a little bit. So that way, I guess. Yeah, okay. Okay, that way. You guys suck. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerd and nerdettes. Today, we are going to be deep diving into the gladiators. Gladiators have always been a cultural phenomenon. People have always been interested in them, in their history, in their training, and their stories. So in this video, I'm going to be going over gladiators, the training styles they used, the classes they had, how they were recruited up from ground to top, their diet, and all sorts of fun things. Excited about this one because it's going to be a deep dive into history, and I hope you guys enjoy. So first things first, where did they come from? Well, they were recruited from a lot of different areas of life. A lot of it being prisoner of war, prisoners in general, criminals, and sometimes volunteers who had high debt. And they were trying to pay off a little bit of money here and there because gladiators could earn a substantial sum if they trained well. So the first thing was selection. So they often had people who specialized in picking the gladiators based on their size and how they looked as a specimen, but overall it was owned by Lanissa, who was the gladiator owner. He would take them on as the charge, and he would basically supply them with food, housing, and training. When gladiators were first brought on, they were known as a recruit, or a tiro. So tiro was the first rank they had. Tiro, step forward. Yeah, I'm new here, so I was wondering if you could tell me exactly what's going on. Well, you're a gladiator now, which means you're going to compete against other men in mortal combat. Huh? Different classes, Murmillo, Retiarias. We'll go over that later, but you'll be fighting against them, other men, okay, things like that. Lions. What was that last part? Huh? Murmillo? No, the other one. Lions. Oh, okay. Well, that's fun. That's something. Don't worry about that, though. Probably won't happen. Okay, that's fine. Whatever. I don't have it anyways. But if I'm doing that, I'm assuming I'm at least going to get solid armor, right? I'm not going to be coming in like a moving tank. Oh, yes. You are going to get armor. The best armor in the world for your ankles, one arm, and head. What about the torso? I wouldn't worry about it. You got a shield. You'll be fine out there. There's a lot of vitals here I want to protect. Go get him, champ. Now, I'm not gonna nitpick because fear of death. But I do feel just a little exposed here. So once the recruit or tiro had been assessed, they were assigned to a dominus. And that was a class-specific trainer. So there was a few different types of classes. There's Murmillo, Thracian or Thrax, Secretarius, and Retiarius. There's another one as well that was pretty similar to a Roman soldier, that was the Propacatares, and there was the Hoplomachus, which was very similar to a Greek style of warfare. So first up, we had the Murmillo. That was usually the heavier class. It was a larger individual who carried weight and a lot of weight. They had a really large shield. Well, shorter than this is a spot that was more analogous to a gladius. They'd have padding on the sword arm as well, and they would have greaves here. So this class had a big helmet also, so it was like 8-pound helmet. So they really were a tank, and so there were some ways they were taught to kind of prop the shield up when they weren't using it on the greave here to kind of save their strength. But overall, they were a juggernaut. So the bigger of the classes, still a lot of exposed areas. They didn't have any chest protection or anything, but this was going to be the heavy. the Thracian or the Thrax. They had a slightly smaller shield, but still very similar to the type, but instead of a straight short sword, they had a curved sword as well. So they were a little bit lighter in their armaments, generally a smaller individual, but they were paired up against the Myrmidon. So those two classes usually clashed. So that's one thing they would do, is separate it by class to kind of give an imbalanced battle. So, you know, the slashing sword's not going to do as well, so they're going to have to come in close over top, get in there, and then the Myrmidon is going to be able to thrust much more efficiently as well. Next up, we have the Retiates. Now, the Retiates was very unique in that they didn't have a helmet, and they would just have one large pauldron over the arm and a net. But a cool thing about them, we're not compared against the Myrmidons with the Thrax, because the Myrmidons and Thrax helmets had a lot of points on it. So if this thing was thrown and caught on top of them, they could pull them down and it would get caught on the helmet. So they were paired mainly against the Sequitur. They had smooth helmets and it was easy for them to slip out of that grasp. Now, based on this, you may think the Retiates had the biggest disadvantage. For one, they didn't have any armor on their head, so that's obviously adding some problems. But one thing they did have was crowd recognition, because the crowd could see their face. And they were a fan favorite because of that. So, I mean, if you had a handsome gladiator, you'd probably want to put him as a Retiates. The crowd very well could help keep you alive if you lost a bout. So it's like, you know, it's a little give and take in there. But definitely this one, when you think of Gladiator, you know, this is probably one of the most iconic looks you can imagine. We have the Hoplomachus. So this was thought to be derived from the Greek style of fighting. It had a smaller round shield, a longer spear, so about 7 or 8 feet. And they didn't wear a T-shaped visor helmet, which I think was a missed opportunity if they were in fact doing it, because it would look very cool. But they had a larger helmet as well with 2 eye holes in it. So definitely tunnel vision in that thing. But this one here feels to be a very strong class, just as far as being able to keep the distance, have that thrust out there. You usually have a small type dagger as well. Each of these different classes had a different doctore that specialized in training them. So for the Retiates, you'd probably have someone who was a retired Retiates. For the Myrmidon, you'd have a retired Myrmidon. So it was a very unique thing in that each one was trained to fight a specific way to counter other classes. Sometimes they would do mixed matches and things like that to see what would happen if you threw, let's say, a Retiates against a Myrmidon, and they had that net and it caught on the helmet, what that would look like. And so people loved to see the diversity in that combat because it gave it a different spice and a different flavor. And this is still very morbid to talk about. So what did their training look like? Well, that would vary class to class, but the major thing they followed was they all still followed the tetrades system. And that's the Greek system in play, which is basically tetra, which is 4. So each thing was set up to 4 quadrants. So you'd have each day, you'd focus on a different specific thing. So the first day will be a prep day where you kind of visualize and plan. Second day is going to be a hard day where you basically go all out. Third day is more of a technique day. The fourth day is a rest and relax day. So they would space that out. Each one would train a little differently, but they would have that same sort of system. So they'd all use the tetrades system. Example of how that would look for, let's say, a Myrmidon, they're going to be a larger, heavier person. So they're going to need more muscle mass. So they had these weights that were called halteres. And they would go anywhere from 5 to 45 and then upwards up to 200 pounds. So you could do compound movements with them. And if it's based off what the tetrad system taught, there weren't a lot of isolation type movements. There's no real drawings of someone doing curls or anything like that. But it was a lot of jumping with the halteres and moving with those to try and strengthen the body. So I'd imagine a lot of physical endurance type exercise as well. The lighter class, like let's say the Retiates, they're going to specialize in agility and speed. Since they're not carrying much armor, they don't have a helmet on, and they're going to be moving quickly. So those types of training involved a lot of sprinting. There's some things where they basically have like flags on them, and kids would try to run and grab it. So they play like flag football, so to speak. And so that was going to be their main thing. They would still do weights, I'm sure, but it was going to be much more agility type endurance training. Quick movements, quick twitch muscle fiber movements to get you faster, explosive, going from place to place so you can get around someone, especially if they have a helmet with only 2 eye holes. You're going to be able to move around quickly. You want to get out of that line of sight as fast as you can. If any of you have seen Spartacus, you know well that in order to be a gladiator, you need abs. But in reality, that couldn't be further from the truth. We're gonna go into diet. Oh man, life is good. Training hard, getting some good food. You trained hard today, Tiro. The Lanista would be proud. Here is your supper. It's this. It's a barley and fava beans. Barley. Okay. Fava beans. Any meat, like at all? No protein. It's expensive, that's why. You don't get fat, right? We need you to get nice and fat so you can handle damage better. I have really bad gas. Yeah, I don't care if you fart. I don't sleep down here anyways. That's for slaves. So contrary to the Greek standard of beauty, which was proportionality, gladiators were all about function. And they were large and muscular and strong. Think Eddie Hall or any of those strong men. They basically wanted the excess fat on their body because it provided as extra protection for their abdomen. And apparently too, it helped them bleed more. As you have more fat tissue, you bleed more. And the crowds loved a good bloodbath, which is just, we've come so far, people, so far. And it was even noted by the physician Galen, who cared for a lot of gladiators. He was Greek, and he viewed their bodies as grotesque abominations, malformations, because they would get more muscle mass on a specific side from overuse. Their necks would get much larger because they trained with their helmets, which were 8 pounds. But it was not an aesthetic look by what you would think of today's standard. It was pure function for one specific task, one specific class. And everything was catered to basically give them the best chance of survival because they were expensive. So how did they train on technique days? Well, usually blunted weapons or wooden swords. And they had a big wooden post, and that's where they do their strikes on. Most of the time, the wooden weapons were about double the weight of the other ones, just to help with endurance and strength capacity. One other interesting thing to note is that they had different ranks as well as far as performers. Think of modern day fights. You have your early preliminary fights, and you have your headliners. The highest ranking gladiator was a primus paulus, and they basically had the best slot. They were the ones that had the most unique characteristics. They had the most flair. I think Gladiator got really right was when Proxima was giving the speech to Maximus. He said that I wasn't the best because I killed quickly. I was the best because I controlled the crowd.
I wasn't the best because I killed quickly. I was the best because the crowd loved me.
It was very much the same way. Think of the best fighters of our lifetimes. Muhammad Ali's, people like that who have their own personality, flair, and style. And that's what people wanted to see. They wanted to see its own unique flair. They got bored with the same rudimentary steps. I think if you've ever probably watched yourself, if you ever competed in jiu-jitsu or wrestling or boxing or MMA, your early fights, you're like, oh man, I really didn't know what I was doing. And then you kind of develop your own style. You get that Anderson Silva, where it's super unique, very special to him. And so people tune in to see his style of fighting and not just the fight itself. Actually, a really funny story behind the scenes of Gladiator. Oliver Reed, who played Proximo, if you don't know anything about him, he was a bit of a hellion, rest his soul, but he was pretty crazy. And there was that one scene when he was in intense negotiations, let's call it, for the giraffes. And in that scene, the actor who was playing the person opposite to him, he said that Oliver Reed wouldn't let go of him during takes, and he's just like, I don't know if this is his process or what. And it went on there for like 30 minutes, and then finally Oliver Reed leaned over to me, he's like, you realize this is a wind-up, don't you? So that just gives you a semblance of the kind of guy he was, just a complete man of chaos. So the other thing that's commonly overflated in movies and cinema in Hollywood is the death rate for the gladiators. You watch any of that, you think 100% they go in that arena, they're dead. Well, in reality, that was not the case. In fact, very rarely did proper gladiators get killed. It would happen, they would have matches to the death, but most of the time the people who were killed were like the cannon fodder or the less skilled gladiators or criminals or just straight executions. Now, as a whole, we all like to glamorize athletes and the heroic deeds of those, but it's very important to note that there's a human cost to this. They were in fact slaves, and their main purpose was in service to the state, to control the masses for manipulation by the emperor. And there's one really famous battle against two well-known gladiators during Titus's reign, Varus and Prasukos, I think, who was a barbarian. I apologize for the mispronunciation. There's probably a lot of those in my videos, but you get what you get. So that was an epic battle of two of the top of the divisions, the top gladiators, as we talked about already. they had a death match and they went hard, and it was recorded by the poet Martial. Now, not a lot of gladiatorial events were recorded, but Martial did a good job of recording this one. And it talked about the epic clash and the battle and how they both basically fought to a standstill. And then on the ground, both of them put up the finger for mercy. And so Titus had to come down and make a decision. Now, the crowd was really enthralled because they saw how hard these two warriors went. Did he go back on his word? Did he give mercy? What did he do? Well, apparently he broke the rudis he was holding, which is what they gave to victorious gladiators, and he gave a piece to each of them. And that showed mercy. That showed that he cared for people who fought, and that endeared him to the crowd and the people. And that's the main reason for the Colosseum. Entertainment, sure, but much, much more, solidifying the emperor's place as head of all of Rome and endearing him to the common people. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is the video. I hope you enjoyed my subpar history and bad pronunciation, and I hope you enjoyed these silly little sandal things here, because they get goat heads in them everywhere. I knew it'd probably be a problem out here, and I could see why closed shoes are definitely superior, but you know, it was fun to try them out and just get a little feel for how they would feel on your feet and everything. So if you enjoyed, be sure to let me know your thoughts, anything I missed, my mispronunciations, or any mistakes that I made. I'd love to hear it, because as always, I love to learn from people who know more than me, because that's the fun and spice of life. So until next time, guys, have a great one.